church is this beautiful, messed up people, right? But that's the beauty of it. It's like this place where a bunch of morons get together and go, my gosh, I need the grace of Jesus in my life, and I do not have it together. That's why I'm here.
Changes things. no one like Jesus. He's a friend, a sinner. He's our healer. He's our provider. He puts families back together again. That's our Jesus. That's our Jesus. No one higher, no one greater. There's no one like Jesus. There's no one like Jesus. Nobody like Jesus. Nobody like Jesus.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Bayside Online. We are so glad that you are here for church today. As you know, we have been working through the book of Proverbs. We're calling this series The Road Less Stupid. It helps us make great decisions for our life, but it also helps us learn how to navigate some of the hard things we experience in this life. Today, we're talking about feelings, right? Good feelings, hard feelings, more intense feelings like fear and anxiety. If you're like me and you struggle to know how to direct your feelings, then this proverb today is for you. You came to the right place. So we invite you to lean in, take some notes, really pay attention to this message by Pastor Curt, and please join us back here every single week for our service at Bayside Online.
Church this weekend. I would say hi to everybody online, but there's no way we're posting this service after that tech foul during the announcements. So it's just me and you. It's just you and me here. I'm Pastor Curt, one of the pastors around here. If you're newer to Bayside, we have several teaching pastors, and it just happens that my weekend fell right here. And I'm really glad it did, because this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. Before we get to the outline today, by the way, if you got one of these, pull it out. You're gonna wanna take some notes. I got a lot of content today and not a lot of white space, so I'm gonna apologize ahead of time, but you want this. If you don't have a physical one, you can text outline to 56316. Before that, I wanna give you an update. Many of you may not even remember, but we raised a bunch of money like 3 years ago, over the last 3 years, to replace our covered courtyard. What we have out there is temporary. It's been temporary for about a decade. And so we kind of went to you and said, would you sacrificially help us do this? And you guys did such a great job. Many of you jumped in on that. And we actually started having it constructed. It's being constructed. It was being constructed in China. Here's a picture of it under construction there, some of the pipes and girders. There's a whole bunch of those I got this week. I won't bore you on them. This is actually the artist's rendering of what it's gonna look like out there. So when new people come, the heat and the rain will have something a little bit more accommodating, do a little more fellowship. Yeah, it'll facilitate more relationships. So all of that has been completed now, and I can announce to you that it is being shipped as we speak. The covered courtyard has been packed up. It's being shipped to us. This is how it's coming. It might take a while, and I need everyone here to pray that it doesn't get shot down when it gets over Alaska. Would you pray for me on that? Okay, all kidding aside, it is being shipped to us, and it'll get here. We're probably starting construction on that a week from Monday, so be ready for that. All right, February 18th, 19th, what is our wisdom for this weekend? Wisdom for strong emotions. Wisdom for strong emotions. We've been going over this Proverb 4:23, probably the heart of the book of Proverbs. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. In other words, what you put in your heart is what comes out of your mouth and is the fruit of your life. I was thinking about this whole idea of wisdom for strong emotions, and I realized I hate most of the movies I watch. I watch a lot of movies. I'm interested in movies. I'm interested in story, and I like stuff. But most of the time, first of all, I hate scary movies. Anyone here hate scary movies? I hated them before as a Christian. I tell you, don't put that in your heart, from the heart. You don't go watching the slasher movies and no. I hate those movies because they stay with me. One time we went to this comedy, Love at First Bite. It's an old movie. And I said to my then fiance, Kelly, I said, I don't want to go to this movie. It's a scary movie. I don't like scary movies. She said, it's a comedy. I went to the movie. Sure enough, it was a comedy. There's nothing scary about it. But in one scene, the main character turns into a bat and flies. That night, I went to bed. The entire night, that bat chased me in my dreams. I'll tell you the other kind of movies I don't like. I don't like sci-fi movies that are stupid. I love sci-fi, but I don't like stupid sci-fi. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where you get to the end of the movie and the odds are against them and everyone's gonna die, and Lieutenant Uhura says, what if we retriangulate the tractor bubble? And they say, well, that will produce tachyon beams, Jim. And then in 2 sentences with fake science, they solve everything. I hate that sort of thing. Do you hate that sort of thing? That is why when my kids talked me into going to the movie Inside Out, I thought, oh, this is gonna be a horrible movie. A movie about emotions. Oh, it's gonna have some message under it. It's gonna be manipulative, and it's gonna want me to believe things that are not in the Bible. And I went in the movie with folded arms going, all right, Pixar, do your best to indoctrinate me into your pop psychology view of the world. And then the first character came on. Do you know this movie? And the first character is Joy. And sure enough, she's all perky. I'm gonna be one of those think positive and all your problems go away, you know. And then the movie starts going on, and I started getting into it, and all of a sudden I realized this movie has truth in it. This movie has great characters in it. This movie, and then all of a sudden I realized that the hero of the movie is not Joy. The hero of the movie next to me is sitting my 18-year-old daughter who's leaving for college the next week. The hero of the movie is sadness. Sadness comes in. She takes over control. Riley, the girl that's leaving and had to move, she's running away from her parents. She's angry, running away. And sadness impacts her heart, and she turns back to her parents, and she goes back to the parents. And at this point, I'm just bawling. Does anyone else can admit that I am crying, to which both my daughters looked at me, and they started laughing at their emotional father. And I said, you should be happy that I got a soft heart. They said, we are. And now I realized they were only laughing at me to keep themselves from crying, and it didn't work. And they said, all 3 of us are just in the snot's coming down. And then Bing Bong sacrifices his life, people. Okay, that's too much spoiling. Spoiler alert on that. But the point of the movie is a profound and accurate point. And here's the point of the movie. Emotions, even difficult ones, are neutral. They're not automatically good for us, but they're not automatically bad for us. And this is the secret, and I think this is the theme if you read these Proverbs over and over again about our emotions. It's about managing our major emotions. What's the definition of maturity? The definition of maturity is when we see both the negative and the positive side of our emotions, and we cultivate the positive and we mitigate the negative. Some people are victims of their emotions. They never manage their emotions. Some people manage their emotions in such a restrictive way that they don't live a free and emotionally healthy life. The power of emotions is found only when we take God's wisdom and we begin to apply it. For instance, anxiety, we're going to talk about the bad side of anxiety in a minute, but anxiety can be a very good thing. When God gives you anxiety, oftentimes it's your early warning system. A lot of times when we feel anxiety, what that means is that we're thinking. So oftentimes people that deal with anxiety are very high IQ people. They're listening, they're looking. Sometimes people come to my office and they say, Pastor Curt, here's what happened to me, and now I have anxiety. What's wrong with me? And I said, there's nothing wrong with you. Your response to those difficult things is logical. Anxiety is warning you that you now need to go and what? Manage those bad things that happen to you. The same is absolutely true about sadness. Just as this movie teaches, one of the few good movies, sadness is often powerful empathy. Sadness is often us looking at what's wrong with the world and letting it impact us. Sadness is often the way that we communicate to others that we need help. It's a powerful communication technique. And also it's true with anger. Even anger can be good or bad depending on how we manage anger. Anger sometimes is the instrument of justice. Anger sometimes is the instrument of transformation. It's the instrument of change. It's that thing that causes us to take the difficult risk to do the right thing. So emotions in and of themselves are neither good nor bad. Oftentimes in our classic Western thinking, we think the less emotion we have in our life, the more rational and mature person that we are. And it's absolutely not the truth. Not in Proverbs, and not according to Pixar's one movie on this. It's really, are you open to say, God, come in and manage my strongest emotions? Help me work on my strongest emotions. Help me accentuate the positive and cultivate the positive and minimize the negative. Let's look at 3 powerful emotions and 3 proverbs that go with them. If you're still with me, give me an amen. The first one is wisdom for anxiety. I'm trying to think of this week of the most anxious moment that I've had in my life. And there's so many of them. I'm a little bit of a worrywart. Anyone here, one of their favorite sins is worry? I kind of just look at everything and I worry. I don't worry about what's being done. I worry when something's not being done right. And I worry what my place is. I worry whether or not I'm going to help people or not. And all of that comes together in me that one of the most anxious places in the world for me is a labor and delivery room. So the first time especially, does any of you guys know what I'm talking about? So, now the guy's got to go in, and I'm all for that, I guess. You go to all the Lamaze classes, and you go in there, and here's the problem. If you get too close and you just start throwing elbows, you're blocking the nurses and doctors who are there to make sure your child is healthy and your spouse lives. You don't want to get in the way of the doctors and the nurses, amen? On the other hand, if you back off, you're a horrible spouse, just sitting in a corner where your spouse is going through labor. And so I'm like, too close, too back. I just wish they would paint footprints on the ground that said, Dad stands here. It's like a safe little lane for Dad to stand there. And I can remember my very first one, I'm in there and I'm holding her hand. I'm like not in the way. I'm on the right side of the bed. I'm close enough to the ice chips. And I'm all anxious. And the nurse looks at me. And this is good nursing, people. She looks at me and she says, hey, Dad. I said, yeah. Do your breathing too. And I started, yeah, you're right. That's good. I feel good. And she meant it with a little bit of humor. And she meant it because she was saying, I see what's going on. And she actually lived out this proverb that we're going to look at first. Look at this proverb for anxiety. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word. No. Look at what it doesn't say. It doesn't say anxiety weighs down the heart, but a positive word. It doesn't say a positive word. It's not that cheap positive thinking trick where you just repeat positive things to yourself and all of a sudden you're not anxious. I could have sat there and went, he's going to be a professional basketball player. He's going to be a millionaire. I could say all the positive things over my son I wanted. It wouldn't have taken away my anxiety that the person I loved the most in the world was going through labor and delivery right then. It was an empathetic word. It was a kind word, the proverb says. Anxiety weighs down the heart is such a poetic and beautiful way to describe our fears and anxieties, isn't it? If we're going to put a general statement out there, a definition, anxiety oftentimes, not all the times, but oftentimes is about uncertainty about the future. When our future is unclear or there are multiple options in the future that don't look positive to us, when there is variables that's introduced, oftentimes when a sudden grief comes into our life, there's prolonged grief that we have where we follow a problem over a long time. Sometimes there's a surprise grief. Someone dies suddenly, or we lose a job suddenly. All of those things introduce uncertainty to the future, which introduces our early warning system of anxiety. And then, therefore, you can look at it this way. If you talk about uncertainty in the future, anxiety can also be defined in 2 different major categories. One is normal anxiety, the anxiety that all of us experience. This is what the proverb is talking about. It's talking about the day-to-day weight of worry and concern we have. And then there's another level called anxiety disorder. And you say, Curt, where is that in the Bible? I'll show you where it is in the Bible. I'll show you where there's the two different anxieties, and I'll do it from one of the best teachers on anxiety that ever lived, the Apostle Paul. Paul says this in Philippians 2:28. This is a little known verse of Paul's. We don't put this one on t-shirts. No one has this on a mug. There is no Pinterest site featuring this verse. Here's the verse. I am more eager to send him, therefore, that you may rejoice at seeing him again, that I, why is he sending someone to the Philippians? I may be less anxious. Paul's saying, I'm worried about you, and I'll be worried about you till my assistant gets there. He's anxious. The Apostle Paul is anxious. Then he says, let's go to Philippians 4. This is the one we put on the coffee cups, t-shirts, and Pinterest. Here it is. Do not be anxious about anything. Which one is it, Paul? And then another place, Paul says, I have the weight of all the churches on me. The psalmists are like this. They're always confessing their anxiety. There is normal anxiety. If Paul didn't figure out a way to conquer it, I'm not going to figure out a way to conquer it. Here's what Paul really means in Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Let's look at this again. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God will transcend all understanding. What Paul's saying here is not that you should be absent of anxiety, but that when you have it, you should do the work of giving it to God. That you should take the action of giving it to God. And you must know that Paul is practicing what he's preaching here, and he's on his knees. He starts almost every letter saying, I remember you in my prayers. And he is petitioning God, God, help me be less anxious about the Philippians. I've listed here for you some normal things that cause anxiety and several anxiety disorders. The big question that comes up when you start looking at the normal anxieties, you have work anxiety, you have moving anxiety, you have family changes, when children leave the house, when your parents pass away as they get older. The question is, Curt, am I experiencing normal anxiety, or have I got an anxiety disorder? How do you tell? I asked two counselors this week, and they both had very similar answers. They're nowhere on your notes, and I didn't give you enough white space. I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't say no to this content. When should I get help? Or when should I encourage my loved one to get help for anxiety? The 3 Ds of when you should get help: duration, degree, and disruption. Duration is this persistent? Have I gone through a season of worry, or is this a persistent thing in my life? When is the last time you had a long season with only average anxiety? Would be a good question to ask. Degree, is this intense? Do I have thoughts, or do they have thoughts of self-harm? That would be another thing that describes the degree. And the last one is it making it hard to go to school, to work, and to form relationships? A lot of times you'll see people, they stop paying their bills. They'll stop doing normal hygiene. And the reason for this is it's just the intensity of it has gotten such that it's hard to function. If that's you, by the way, you should feel no shame. If you have a loved one that feels this way, you should feel, and no shame for 2 reasons. Listen to me carefully. The last 4 years have been the most 4 uncertain years of our lifetime. When you mess with the future, as much as we messed with the future in that last 3.5, 4 years, it is logical to come out of it needing help with anxiety. We are people that need a plan. We need a path. And when you just say, we don't know when this will end or how the path will be, that's very, very, very difficult. It's okay to get help. If you had a problem with your gallbladder hurt, and you went to a gallbladder expert, and your gallbladder expert said to you, you know, you went through some hard things and it hurt your gallbladder, and we're gonna have to do some stuff to help your gallbladder, you would not feel shame about that. You'd probably ask for prayer about that. You'd probably tell your friends about it. If it was your lung, you said for some reason your lung you fell down and it got punctured, and you had to go to a lung expert, and they had to make sure you were breathing right, and they gave you the medicines you needed to keep the inflammation down so your lung could heal. You wouldn't feel shame about that. But when we actually get injuries in our brain, both physical and emotional, because it's so intricate to our identity, it's our words, it's our feelings start there. Because of that, we add a layer of shame. And I want to tell you, there's no difference between the gallbladder or the lung or the brain. When they get hurt, there is no shame in seeking help for them. You just got to take the first couple steps. I'll talk about that in a second. Here's my key, write it in. Asking for help is not weak, it's wise. It's not weak, it's wise. You don't have to do this alone, this thing. And it's true with our second point. We're going to talk about wisdom for sadness. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. I've talked before about my mom's 11-year battle with Alzheimer's. And I was thinking about this as I was meditating on this proverb. And I thought, the saddest part of my mom's journey for me was not when she passed. When she passed, I was kind of relieved. I was relieved for my dad. When she passed, it allowed us, it gave us permission. We started talking about all the great things about my mom again. Instead of talking about her care and how much it was costing and how my dad was doing and who was going to take the shift to be with my dad. We were talking about all of that when she was in it. When it ended, we started talking about how funny my mom was and how beautiful my mom was. And so it allowed us to grieve, and it was very sad. But with the grieving, there was a sweetness, and we came together as a family more. I got closer with my brothers again, and the hardest part wasn't that. The hardest part was about 6 months before that. About 6 months, maybe a year if I looked at it, where my mom just seemed stuck. She had no language. She couldn't communicate. She didn't know who any of us were. She was filled with anxiety because of not knowing who we were. I remember one week, I spent the whole week with my dad up in Spokane, and he said, Curt, I don't know what to do with this dog. My parents had an old English sheepdog named Yeti. That's Yeti right there. Yeti stood about this tall. She had like a dinosaur head on her, so smart. She was smarter than at least two of my brothers, and I'm not gonna tell you which two. Don't be offended by that. You know who you are. My dad says, I don't know what to do with this dog. I said, we'll take the dog. We love this dog. And I got along really well with the dog. So at the end of the week, I go to this rental place, the car rental place. I said, me and this dog have got to drive to Elk Grove, California. So the guy said, I'm sorry, the only car I have is this little tiny Chevy, just tiny Chevy. We get in the back of the car. Yeti is so nervous, she's putting her head right on my shoulder right here. So driving down the highway at night, we look like a two-headed monster. And I'm thinking about all of these problems with my mom and all these problems with my dad. And I am just losing hope. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to help my dad. I don't know how to help my mom. We get to Klamath Falls, and my depression kind of turns into a little bit of anger. And I'm like, I am just going to speed. I said, God, I'm going to sin. I'm going to go faster than I should, and I'm just going to get home. I need to get home. And so I start speeding. And for 2 minutes, I'm driving like 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, and I don't even get the benefit of it because 2 minutes, this cop comes right behind me, gets out of the car. I unroll the window. He says, license and registration. I just looked at him. I went, bah! And I started crying. And Yeti sticks her head out the window, goes, bah! Now, if you're counting, this is the second Curt bawling illustration in this sermon. That's true. I don't cry like this every day. It's just like four or 5 days a week. So anyway, I'm just, this grown man is sitting there, and I'm just handing him my license. Just it's coming out. The dam breaks. He goes, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Is it wrong? Is it physically or anything? I'm like, and my mommy. I didn't even know what I said. He finally leaves, and he comes back. He says, listen, don't drive if you're not going to. I'm like, I'm fine now. I'm fine. He goes, honestly, I hope you're fine. And I'm so sorry. Whatever's going on, I'm so sorry. Here's a $450 ticket. He gives me a ticket. If they ever tell you they don't give you a ticket if you cry, they're lying. Let's look at the proverb. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. What was I crying about there? I was crying about being stuck. I was crying about the fact that there was no way forward. I was crying about the fact that my mom would never go to my kids' weddings. That my mom was never going to sit at the foot of the Christmas tree anymore. All the things I got from my mom, my kids were going to have to now get from me because she wasn't going to be there. You know what grief is? Here's one definition of grief. Grief is taking all of the things you imagined would be when someone passes or leaves you and removing them from your future. That's the work of grief. And I was just doing that work. What's interesting to me about this proverb is what it doesn't say. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. So, therefore, you should not do this. That's not in there. Therefore, you should do this. There's no admonition, there's no correction, there's no advice. It's the Proverbs being at their most wise. What he's saying is grief is a part of it. Grief is the cost of love. Grief is the cost of living in a world that's broken on every level. Our world is broken psychologically and environmentally and relationally and spiritually. Part of living in this brokenness is grief. The only people that do not feel sadness and even depression are those that are so consumed with their own self that they're sociopath. You know, I remember comforting my kids all the time when they get really sad. And it's in a little light moment, I look at them and say, you know, I'm not happy that you're sad right now, but I'm relieved that it proves you're not a serial killer. Just not a serial killer. That was one of your mom and I's biggest prayers while you were being birthed. Just don't give us a serial killer. Why? Listen to me, person that deals with depression. You love and think deeply. And you love and think deeply in a broken world. So it gives us sadness. Depression can be looked at like this. Depression is a loss of faith in the future. So anxiety is uncertainty in the future. Something's gonna happen, but we don't like it, we don't know what it is, and there's three. Depression is kind of just going, I can't even think about the future. I don't think this is gonna turn out well. I feel no dawn, I feel no morning sun rising in my future. And it's exactly what the Proverbs says. When the sun is held back, when the future is held back, when there is no vision or pathway or sense of where to go, our hearts become sick, literally become sick. We can't function. The opposite is true. When the season breaks, have you ever just walked out of your house one day and it was winter, and then the next day it wasn't winter anymore, and you could feel the California vitamin D coming into your body? This is that proverb. And what it tells us is not instruction, but reality. There will be sick heart seasons and days. And there will be longing fulfilled seasons and days. What are the causes of depression? I hesitate to even bring this up because there's so many causes for depression, you really can't nail it down. And no one should say, because my depression happened differently, I'm less or it's harder to treat. But a lot of the common ones are this: unmet expectation. Oftentimes you'll see this sadness in marriage when people thought their marriage would end up this way and it never ends up the way you want, and you have unmet expectation and lack of communication about that unmet. A lot of times one partner is holding it in. I didn't think it'd be this way at all, but I'm just gonna suffer through it. Or undealt with anger. Oftentimes when something harmful that produces anger happens in you, you don't either have the courage or the ability or the circumstance not right, and so that anger gets put in the background, but you can't keep it there. It leaks out as sadness and depression. Grief and loss, I've talked about. The idea that you're processing through not having what you thought you would have in your future. A physical condition can cause this. Sometimes a physical condition that is happening anywhere in your body, and sometimes it's a damaged moment that happens to your brain, that you have a brain injury. And here's the really, really challenging thing about depression and sadness is that your depression can be caused by all of the above and more. In fact, I rarely experience people walking through depression that only have one cause. Oftentimes, it'll start with one cause, but we're not multiple people. We're not intellectual me and pastor me and father me and friend me and bad golfer me. It's just me. It's just me. There was a gentleman in the 1800s who was a railroad construction guy. His name was, let me see if I can pull it up here. He's got a funny little name. Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage. Anyone ever heard the story of Phineas Gage? So he's blowing up a bunch of rocks so they can lay down the railroad tracks, right? And he's doing it by taking an iron rod and pounding explosive powder into a compressed place in the rock. And then he's gonna light it. Well, the problem is his iron rod hit a rock, created a spark, and the thing blew up in his face. The rod literally, sorry crazy people, went through his jaw and through the top of his head. They took the rod out, they sewed him up, he lived the rest of his life. In fact, the first reports is that he wasn't injured at all. He said, I don't feel any pain from this at all. He could talk almost immediately. As soon as his mouth healed, he didn't have a slur, not like a stroke victim, nothing. But what happened was this. He lost his ability to make decisions. And he lost his ability to feel emotions. His case was so rare and so strange that it began a study of the amygdala, where scientists did study after study, and what they found is that our rational Western way of thinking about emotions is not true. I said this before. We tend to think the less emotional we are, the better decisions we make. And that's not how it works, because that's not how it can work. Your decisions are fueled by emotions. And if you take anxiety and fear and love and passion and connectedness and all the different things that we feel out of your life, if you literally destroy them, you are rendered with no ability to make a decision. You're not a thinker with some emotions. You're an emotional person who thinks. And this is why it's so very important that we actually do the work of grief. We do the work. Here's my key. Mourning is hard, but ultimately good for the soul. The work of depression is hard, but good for the soul. So my mom passed away, and then about 3 years later, Yeti passed away. She's a big dog. They don't live a long time. I'm actually close with our childhood veterinarian, so I called him up. He was an old man. At this point, his name is Mike. He said her stomach had flipped one morning, and he said she's not going to make it. There's no surgery, so the kids came home, they said their goodbyes, and I said, I'm taking Yeti to the, okay, I know this is a sad sermon, but it's on depression, so stay with me. I'm gonna take her to the vet. And kids are like, we all wanna go too. So we all get in the car, we go to the vet, we get in the waiting room. The vet comes out, bring Yeti to the back room, and Emma, 5 years old, looks at me and says, if you do not let me go in that back room, I will never speak to you ever again. She's my one with fire. So I said, I looked at the mom looked at me, and okay, so we came back there. The vet was wonderful. She said, this is gonna happen very quickly. Don't be shocked or surprised. This is gonna happen quickly. Sure enough, Yeti gave one little breath, and then she passed. And my daughter started screaming, wailing, just wailing. And I was like, it's all right. She's like, don't touch me. We went into the foyer, wailing. 5 other people with their pets left. They just left. We get in the car, everyone's crying, but Emma is wailing. And we're driving home, and I'm like, I have broke my child. I should have said no. That was too much for a 5-year-old. I broke her. We go in the living room. She sits on the couch. She is wailing. All the other kids go to a private place, to their bedrooms, and she is just wailing. After about 20 minutes, I looked at Kelly. I said, what do? We got to do something here. And just when I was going to come and try to talk to her again, she gave out one last wail, and she went, oh, that was hard, but I think I'm done. What's to eat? She got up and ate something. Now, you may not be as good as Emma Harlow in doing the work of depression. It may take you a little longer, but that's the work, my friend. That's the work. We talk about it, we cry about it, we talk about it some more, and we cry about it some more. All right, one last point. You got one less in you? The last one is wisdom for anger. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm to the end. How many here you have more than 2 or 3 siblings? You got 2 or 3 siblings? So I'm the 5th of 7. It's the low power position. You're not as cute as the youngest one. You're not as powerful as the oldest. I'm the 4th of 4 boys. I was the least athletic of all 4 boys, and I was the scrawniest of all 4 boys. I was the runt of the litter. And I would get teased by my brothers, and we would roughhouse, and we came from that era where you let boys punch each other because somehow that's going to develop character. And, I can remember going to my mom and saying, when I was young, I said, Mom, Carrie punched me. And she would look at me and say, go tell him to not do that. And I'm like, thanks, Mom. And every once in a while, I get so mad at my older brother, who's 4 years older than me and much bigger and much stronger than me. I get so mad at him, I would have this irrational thought. And the thought is, I'm going to go beat him up. That's it. It's like with those cartoon characters on Dragon Ball Z. None of you know Dragon Ball Z. And the madder they get, the more powerful they get. And I would just like Super Saiyan, rah, and I would just charge at him and I would tackle him. And the second my body hit his body, my brain would say, that was stupid. That was really stupid. He's much stronger than you, and now you are going to be in pain. And I was never able, why would I do such a stupid thing? There was no chance I would ever win that fight. And here's the reason. Inside of you and inside of me is what researchers call the rage circuit. We have this little thing in us, and some of us, we wear our rage circuit on the surface. Some of it we bury deep down. Dr. R. Douglas Fields, he's the leader in the rage circuit research. But what they say is this is a survival technique in us, and that when we actually click that rage circuit, all rational thought goes away, and we go into not flight mode, full fight mode. How does the rage circuit work? There's 4 or 5 different ways it works. First of all, if your life or limb is threatened, if you are physically threatened, you will often go in this thing, or a loved one is physically threatened. This is what happens when moms go in and, they go into the cage with the bear to get the kid that fell in the bear. Their rage circuit has flipped because of life or limb. The other one is when your mate, family, or social group is threatened. The third one is if freedom of movement is threatened. If someone grabs your arm, puts a blindfold over your face, you'll immediately go from calm to rage circuit. If territory or resources are threatened or stolen, and finally, if you see a gross injustice, if you see someone that's handicapped being misused, if you see a child that's being threatened, even if it's not your own child, oftentimes, and in those moments, the rage circuit is actually a very, very helpful and important thing. The problem with the rage circuit is when we actually trip it and defend not our friends, our family members, or a great injustice, but when we trip it to defend our own ego. And that's where anger becomes a problem in our life. Fools give full vent. They don't regulate their rage circuit. But the wise learn to self-regulate. What can anger be called? The need to alter the future. And this is why anger, even anger, as unpleasant as it is neutral. Sometimes the future needs altering. Sometimes you gotta put your foot down. But sometimes the future you're desiring is selfish and manipulative and mean and sinful. It just depends on whether or not you've let God mold and mature your emotions. I love this passage in Ephesians 4. It's probably the best passage on anger, and it reflects the wisdom of this Proverbs 1. Can I just dissect this Ephesians 4 passage for you a little bit? It's right there on the screen. It's not in your notes. Or maybe it's in your notes. I can't remember if it's in your notes, but I'm going to dissect it anyway. He says this, in your anger, do not sin. Apostle Paul, in your anger, do not sin. It tells us 2 things. Number 1, being angry is not a sin. If you got angry this week and you were really mad at someone you love, chances are you're technically what we call a parent. Anger is not sin. It's also, though, the second thing this first statement tells us, it's not a license to sin. I have couples in my office all the time who say, well, why did you say that? That's so hurtful. Oh, I was angry. I just had to get it out. No, keep that in. Bury that right behind your pancreas. Put it way back there. In your anger, do not sin. This is, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anger denied grows. Anger delayed grows. Don't just go, oh, I'm just gonna let it go through. If you're angry about it, you gotta go do it. Now, how many have heard that advice, like, don't go to bed angry with your spouse? Have you heard that advice? I have found in principle this is good advice. In practice, this is horrible advice. So if you're fighting at 3 a.m. and you have low blood sugar and are sleep deprived, something tells me you're not gonna sort out what to do with your Aunt May coming over to visit that you didn't want her to come visit. Is anyone with me on this? Don't fight at 3. You can look at each other and say, time out, sleeping, eating, then we'll have the fight tomorrow. The point, the principle behind this is if you actually deny and delay anger, it makes it more complicated. than if you go after it quicker or sooner. Let's go read the next one. Get rid of all bitterness and rage and anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Keep working on your anger. If you've had resolution with the person, you still feel angry, you still have work to do, and that's all right. We're not like light switches. We can't just switch ourselves on and off. Sometimes we have to do a little bit more anger. Anger, a lot of times for me, is like what I do when I have a cold. Do you ever do this? You have a cold, and you go to bed, and you're like, can't get out of bed, and you're like, this is the worst time to have a cold, and all my work is piling up, and I'm getting behind. So you wake up the next day, okay, I think I'm better. And you go out and you work the next day, and you're not better, you still have that cold, and because you worked, then you get double sick. Anyone done that foolishness before? This is the same way with anger. You get rid of it sometimes, just enough of it to function. But you haven't really done all the work of getting rid of all the bitterness, malice, and wrath. I've left you some other questions, bullet points to look at there. Here's the key, write it in. Anger is designed to pass through us, not to take a root in us. If you wanted to put everything the Bible teaches on anger into one sentence, this would be the sentence. It's okay to be angry. If you're not angry, you're not watching. If you're not angry, you're not looking. If you're not angry, you're not actually caring about what happens enough. But you cannot let that anger define you and reside in you. You've got to let it drive you to do good things. And that leads me to my final thought, which is simply this. If you're dealing with a difficult emotion, take heart. Jesus also dealt with difficult emotions. Just think of Jesus last week on this earth. The Bible tells us that he showed up on a mount outside of Jerusalem, and he looked over the whole city, and we were given the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. He said, "Oh, Jerusalem, if you only knew who stood here. Jerusalem, the city of peace, had no peace." I often ask myself this question, why did Jesus weep? And of course, the great sorrow that was going to come into his life was probably part of it. I can imagine he wasn't looking forward to being tortured. But I also wonder if he thought about all the people that were going through their normal day, all the people that were doing their laundry and going to school and going to work and buying bread, all of the people that were doing normal life and had no idea that the Son of God would be just blocks away from them, just a few streets from where they were living. And literally, he was walking to his death for them. It says that when he got down in Jerusalem, you know what he did next? He made a whip, according to John. Jesus went and bought the materials for a whip. You are a little bit angry if you're into whip crafting. And he went into his father's house. And he saw in the Gentile court, the court that you and I would have been invited to, that there was no room for Gentiles. Instead, they had set up money changers in there. And it says that Jesus Christ, this Jesus that we like to imagine as a little bearded hippie man with a fuzzy lamb on his shoulder, this man took that whip he made and he started turning over those tables. And he said in a loud, angry voice, "My Father's house is meant to be a house of prayer." And in that way, he was angry for you and me, the nations that had no room in the presence of God. And then, of course, he goes to the garden to pray on that fateful night he's arrested. 3 times he gets up, and 3 times he says to his friends, "I'm being crushed. The weight of this, the anxiety of this is crushing me." He said, "I might die here because the weight of worry is so heavy on me." I want to tell you, my friend, if you have suffered or anyone you love has suffered from sadness or anger or anxiety, Jesus knows exactly what you went through. Jesus knows exactly what you're going through. Jesus knows. Can I pray for you? So difficult to talk about such important things in such a brief amount of time. I pray for that loved one that someone here is caring for every day, praying for every day, that's battling with depression or anxiety or another emotional challenge. Father God, I pray you strengthen them, you give them hope, you let them see the future is not uncertain. The future is not deferred. God, you are the future changer. Lord, I pray for that person that might be going through this themselves. That, Lord, you would find a way to help them work. And that they would do the work. And that, God, your Spirit would guide them. Encourage them every step of the way. You would surround them with people that would encourage them. I pray against all shame. I pray for breakthrough. If you're here and you have not given your life completely and totally to Christ, I would say the first step to experiencing the love of God, the healthy emotions that he has to offer, for knowing that he knows what you're going through, the first step is surrendering your life completely and totally to him. If you've not given your life to Christ, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to do that right now, just by praying a simple prayer. I'm gonna pray it out loud. You pray it in your heart. I don't want you to worry about a single thing other than giving your life back to your Creator. Jesus came and he died on the cross for you. He came to Jerusalem that week so that no obstacle would be between you and your Father in heaven. But you have to accept that gift. Right where you're sitting right now, pray this simple prayer. Lord, this life you've given me, I give it back to you today. The forgiveness that you've won for me on the cross, I receive it. Your guidance, your knowing exactly what I've gone through, your help, your empathy, your strength, I receive all of that into my life. And I make you the true Lord over my life. Now help me, God. Help me to follow you when I don't feel you. Help me to feel your presence more and more. Help me to walk with you each and every day. If you prayed that prayer, I want to just do one more thing, one more minute. I want to pray over you. I want to pray that you would walk with Jesus. I've known a few people with significant emotional challenges that had immediate breakthroughs, but the vast majority, it was that walking in trust with God and surrounding themselves with the right people. That's what God had done. I want to pray that you would walk into that prayer every day. If that was you and you just prayed that prayer with me, would you do me a favor? Would you just raise your hand right now and say, yeah, pray for me, Pastor Curt. Just put it up, keep it up just for a second. I want to make sure I see it. I got you. Father, thank you for each and every one that decided to surrender their life tonight. Father, I ask you would do exactly what I know you're going to do. You'd be with them, even when they don't feel you. You'd guide each and every one of their steps. You would surround them with the people they need to accomplish everything that you made them for. That you would be you, God, and they would lean into you. And I ask it in Jesus' name, and everyone said, amen.
Hey guys, Pastor Mark here, one of the senior pastors around here. So glad that you are actually part of Bayside Online. You really are part of our family. We have grown over the last couple of years online a ton, and we really do consider you as part of our church family. So what that means is make sure you subscribe and share this. It's great. But also get in a community group. Start watching the Bible study. Start being engaged. Even give. One of the ways that we can actually do online church and have this global community and even do the ministry of our campuses is by people partnering with us in the gospel, as Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 1. And that means by your resources, financially. There are people all over the world getting blessed through what we do at Bayside. And so obviously part of that is giving and using and stewarding that for the glory of God. So we're super thankful if you do that. We'd love you to start doing that, and just super thankful you're part of our church. So glad you're with us. Make sure that you let us know you're watching and part of this, because we want to get in touch with you and thank you and serve you any way we can. Anyway, thanks guys, and we will see you next week.